Hey, it's your guy Tyrrell back with the interviews. In today's video, we're going to break down how Mikel Arteta won the tactical battle over Nuno Espirito Santo to help Arsenal defeat Wolves. When we break down the game and we do look at the board, we end up seeing both sides playing in a back three. Arsenal in a 3-4-3 and Wolves shifting to a 3-5-2. And first, what we'll do is that we'll start with Arsenal, see how they look to get beyond that Wolves backline and the issues they encountered tactically against Nuno Espirito Santo's side. When we break it all down, what we end up seeing is that yes, Wolves are in a 3-5-2 and without the ball they shifted into a 5-3-2. And the key component to Wolves' approach without the ball was that they looked to ensure that Dani, Ceballos and Granit Xhaka couldn't get on the ball in that midfield zone. So what you end up seeing here is that rather than looking to step out and press the center backs, Wolves had Adama, Traore and Raul Jimenez ahead of the center backs, but they were blocking the passing lane into Dani, Ceballos and Xhaka. When you look at that midfield zone, what you end up seeing is that Ruben Neves is that spare man, and you had Dendoncker and Moutinho stepping up to Ceballos and Xhaka. So what you end up seeing here is that Ceballos and Xhaka were boxed in by the midfield shuttlers and the center forwards, but then you had Ruben Neves also pinching in just in case one of his shuttlers did lose out on a challenge. So what you can say about this Wolves shape is that it was a hexagonal press around that Arsenal midfield, and they struggled to get balls into that zone. There were times where we ended up seeing Ceballos dropping off deeper to get on the ball, but he would still be tasked with Jimenez and Adama Traore ahead of him blocking off his passing lanes. Ultimately, that means that the front three were lacking service, and even if they were able to shift the ball out to the wing backs, what you would see was that Doherty and Johnny would step forward. There were times where you did see the midfield shuttlers in Dendoncker and João Moutinho stepping out into the path of Mustafi and Kolasinac. And for instance, if you had Dendoncker shifting out into the path of Kolasinac, then Ruben Neves would be tasked with getting tighter to Xhaka, unless you had Raul Jimenez or Adama Traore dropping off a bit deeper, and vice versa when we ended up seeing Moutinho at times stepping out into the path of Mustafi. So in terms of their overall build-up play, that was the issue that Arsenal encountered against Wolves, and Mikel Arteta's attempt to overcome that was to have the wider players in Saka and Aubameyang drop off a bit deeper. You could obviously look to have David Luiz and the center backs play long balls over the top. We did see Aubameyang making darting runs in between Doherty and Bolly and Cody, and the same thing can be said about Bukayo Saka moving into those spaces between Roman Saiz and Cody, but those passes weren't being connected. So what we ended up seeing here was that Saka was often dropping off from Roman Saiz to the left of João Moutinho to serve as a passing outlet. There was one time in that first half where you saw David Luiz split Moutinho and Jimenez to find Saka in that zone, and you also saw Aubameyang dropping off a bit deeper as well. There was a moment in that half where we ended up seeing Dendoncker stepping out into the path of Kolasinac, and Kolasinac was able to wrap the ball around Dendoncker into the path of Aubameyang dropping off. There was no pressure on Aubameyang, so he was able to push forward and split Doherty and Bolly to find Tierney breaking in behind. But with Saka and Nketiah breaking into attacking zones, the pullback didn't meet them and Wolves were able to clear their lines. The other manner in which Arsenal were able to get into good positions was when they were able to shift the ball out to the right-hand side. As you can see on the left-hand side, Dendoncker was stepping out to Kolasinac and limiting his threat from those deeper positions. But out on the right, Mustafi was getting forward, and if it was Mustafi or Cedric getting on the ball, Moutinho would step out. So when Arsenal were able to pull Moutinho out of position, what we ended up seeing from Saka was that he was making darting runs in between Roman Saiz and Johnny, and then that would create a lane for Nketiah to run across Cody. So then that would allow Cedric or Mustafi, whoever is on the ball, time to play passes into that space to get Nketiah or sometimes Aubameyang, as those two did swap positions at times, across Cody into 1v1 situations. We saw it around the 20th minute mark where you had Mustafi pushing forward and pulling out Moutinho, and what we saw from Saka was that he shifted laterally across Saiz and then dropped deeper to pull him out of position, and that created a lane for Mustafi to play a pass into the path of Nketiah trying to run off Cody. And even when you look to the build-up to Arsenal's winner, it stems with Mustafi pushing forward and pulling out Moutinho, but he ends up sliding the ball out to Cedric. Johnny doesn't step into the path of Cedric because you end up seeing the movement of Saka in between Roman Saiz and Johnny. What you also see is that you have Nketiah shifting across Cody and then dropping off deeper to pull him out of position. That now creates a passing lane for Aubameyang ahead of Bowley and Doherty, and that's when you end up seeing Cedric playing a switching ball out into the path of Aubameyang. Arsenal get a bit lucky because Bowley should be clearing that pass, but it ends up falling into Aubameyang, and then you see Aubameyang playing in Tierney on the overlap. Tierney receives the ball, and you see Aubameyang and Saka darting between the center backs, and that's when the pullback is played. But that doesn't occur if you don't have the movement of Saka and Nketiah dropping off a bit deeper to create space for Aubameyang moving narrow, and that also creates space for Tierney on the overlap. Now we have to look to Arsenal from a defensive aspect. Without the ball, they dropped off into a 5-4-1, but we did see Mikel Arteta instruct his men to press from the front in the earlier stages. That means that you do have the front three stepping out to Wolves' back three, you have the wing backs pushing higher, you have 3v2 at the back, and then the midfield battle still remains with Xhaka stepping out to Dendoncker and Ceballos pushing out into the path of Moutinho. The issue that you have here is that Ruben Neves is the spare man. Obviously, what you can say is that if they do look to press from the front three can block off the passing lane into Ruben Neves, or specifically Nketiah can do that. But what we ended up seeing from Arsenal here is rather than going that route, they had Granit Xhaka stepping out into the path of Ruben Neves to ensure that he couldn't dictate the tempo of the game from those deeper positions. That does leave Dendoncker free, and what that allows Arsenal to do now is because they have 3v2 at the back, then you push Kolasinac into that zone. That is the logical route for Arsenal to stop this Wolves side from building out of the back, but the problem that Arsenal encountered there is when Adama Traore shifted out into that zone. Now you have 2v1 with Dendoncker and Traore in the path of Kolasinac, and that allows either Dendoncker or Traore to pick up the ball freely and run at goal, and obviously it was Traore getting into those positions. What Arsenal could have done here is that if that situation did arise, then you shift David Luiz out to Dendoncker and you push Kolasinac higher to close down Traore in those higher positions. The other option for Arsenal would be for Xhaka to recover his positioning when he steps to Ruben Neves and look to close down one of those two players. However, Arsenal didn't revert to those options, and they did encounter a few scares against Traore. Likewise, what you can also say here was that when Arsenal dropped off a bit deeper into that 5-4-1, they suffered in that left side position because Xhaka and Aubameyang left a huge gap in that zone, and it's because Aubameyang wasn't getting narrow enough, and that's when you ended up seeing Traore drop off to receive the ball in that pocket of space and then push forward. There was a time in that first half where Neves was able to split Aubameyang and Xhaka for Traore in that zone, and that's where you end up seeing the 2v1, and you can't have Tierney shifting over because Doherty was higher up the pitch. So that allowed Traore to turn and run at that Arsenal backline, cutting across Ceballos, but firing a shot over the net. Minutes later, we ended up seeing Ruben Neves play the ball across Nketiah into Dendoncker, and Dendoncker at around that halfway line was able to split Aubameyang and Xhaka once again to find Traore dropping off deeper to pull out Kolasinac. So as you can see, Traore was causing this Arsenal backline problems, and it was based off the fact that they weren't getting numbers around him and they weren't getting tight when balls were played into him. There were times where Arsenal were successful against Traore, and it was when Kolasinac was tight on him, and also when he got support from Xhaka or Ceballos to ensure that it was 1v2 in that zone, and that limited Traore's threat. But we did see a few more tactical tweaks in that second half, and it stems with Adama Traore shifting out into a wider position and Doherty playing a bit narrow so that balls could be played in Traore on that touchline. The decision to have Traore holding the touchline was to get him into 1v1 situations against Tierney or Kolasinac, and it's because they fancied his ability to win those duels. We ended up seeing Doherty nod a loose ball over Kolasinac into the path of Traore, who brushed him off to break towards the byline, and he was able to create a chance for Jimenez darting between Cedric and Mustafi, but he nodded his effort wide of the net. We eventually ended up seeing Wolves shift to a 3-4-3 by bringing on Jota for Dendoncker, and we ended up seeing Arteta react to their decision to play Traore in that wider position by bringing on Maitland-Niles, who looked a bit more comfortable in those 1v1 situations, and he's more athletic. And even when Traore was able to beat him out in that wider zone, Kolasinac was able to come across to provide cover. What we also saw from Arsenal in that half was when Wolves were looking to play out in those wider areas, this, Saka and Aubameyang did a much better job of dropping off deeper to ensure that it was 3v2 in those wider zones, based off the fact that we didn't see Roman Saiz or Boli looking to push forward into those attacking zones. So with Saka and Aubameyang dropping off a bit deeper, they provide additional cover, and that was specifically useful down that right-hand side against Adama Traore. What should also be mentioned is that Wolves' decision to move to a 3-4-3 ultimately did benefit Arsenal, as they now could mark man v man across the pitch, but they did encounter a slight problem for a brief period when Jota's movement into deeper zones did lead to quality Wolves chances. He was dropping off Mustafi to get on the ball in that midfield zone, and within a 2-minute span, he should have put Wolves level. But as you can see here, while both sides did encounter some issues in the battle of the back three, Mikel Arteta deserves credit for making the slight modifications and identifying solutions for the issues that Wolves presented them by ensuring that they couldn't build out of the back and build in that midfield zone. Yes, Wolves did cause Arsenal problems through Traore and Jimenez, but Wolves have themselves to blame for not taking their chances and ultimately not being able to deal with the movement of Arsenal's front three when they were shifting out of position, pulling the Wolves defense out of position as well, and then getting other key attackers into good attacking zones. Hi everybody, thanks for watching, and subscribe here for your latest tactical analysis and daily commentary on the Interview show. And if that wasn't enough, don't forget you could find more organic, unfiltered soccer/football analysis on the Interviews podcast, the best soccer/football podcast in the world, available on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, and any Android apps on your Android devices.